and welcome back to Let's Talk Adoption. I'm Heather Featherston. I'm here with Kim King, and today we are talking about adoption timelines, answering questions, describing what they are, because, Kim, when anyone starts or looks into private domestic adoption, often the first question they ask is, how long will it take? And really, there's parts that move fast. There's some parts that may feel like they're quite slow, but today we want to walk through the entire timeline from day one to finalization, knowing that the topic is really for prospective adoptive parents in a domestic private adoption.
Mm-hmm. And we'll let you know which time frames are more in your control and less in your control as well. And some of these timelines and time frames can happen simultaneously.
Right.
So we'll point those out to you as well as explain along the way maybe a little bit of adoption terminology, especially for adoptive parents who are new to the process or just exploring adoption for the first time. It's helpful to know ICPC, what's that? TPR,
Right.
what's that? Right?
And we want you to know that even though we are giving general timelines, there are things we may say that sound long or sound short, or you may say, well, but I've been waiting longer than that, or this is taking me longer. We're going to go through sometimes what can influence those waits, including, things like your adoption preferences, the professional you're working with, and what those looks like. So let's start, Kim, I think with the big picture timeline. Often when people ask how long will this take, they're thinking start to finish. How long is it going to take?
Right. So I would say 6 months to 2 years, give or take.
Right.
Some adoptions may take a total of 3 years or 5 years.
Right.
And an agency will generally give you a ballpark on what they're seeing with adoption so that you can understand that before getting started.
And that's really from starting to placement. And then after you have the child, you have this time in most states from placement until finalization. And that can be 3 months to 6 months, even a year. But, total start to finish probably is average 1 to 3 years, depending on a lot of different things. But, I think it's good to know as we jump into these individual timelines that adoption isn't one long wait. It really is a series of different stages with their own steps and waits within them.
And can I just say, as I often am listening through the ears of someone brand new to adoption, if we say finalization can take several months, I just want to stop for a second. We're going to talk about that later, but I want to let you know that a birth parent does not have all that time to change her mind. It's more just the legal classification that you haven't finalized in court yet. So rest assured, birth moms typically don't have an entire year or 6 months to change their mind. We'll talk about it, but I just want to help lift that off your shoulder. If that was like oh my gosh, really? This could happen? I could have a baby for that long? And even in private adoption, where birth mom chose me and wanted to place her baby with me, that she could change her mind all that time, rest assured that's not what we mean by that. So let's get into it.
So really, I think the first part of timelines it's good to talk about is actually two processes that can be going on at the same time. One is your home study, and one is the creation of your profile or website or whatever presentation materials you're making for birth mothers to consider you as a prospective family for her child.
Home studies are going to usually take 6 to 8 weeks, maybe a little longer than that, 10 weeks. There are some scenarios where a home study can be expedited. Let's say you're being drawn into adoption because someone needs you to adopt a child from them. It's not something you were proactively pursuing, or even if you were beginning to proactively pursue an adoption and starting to plan, and then suddenly you just got a match out of nowhere, right? A month
Mhm.
in, you got a match. You can contact a home study provider and say, look, there's a baby being born in 2 weeks or a baby that was born last week. Someone wants me to adopt. How can I get a home study done right away? And home study providers can expedite a home study to have everything done within a few days or a week, right? And there are
Mhm.
extra fees associated to speed that up, of course. But if there is an emergency placement needed for you and you don't have a home study, rest assured most home study providers have that process of expediting your home study. Now, most families don't encounter an emergency placement right off the bat, okay?
Mhm.
So they will usually go through the course of the process of the home study, 6 to 8 weeks. And a big part of why it takes so long is background checks coming back. The home
Mhm.
study is a process. You have a lot of paperwork to fill out, questions to answer, many questionnaires, writing about your upbringing for married couples, writing about how you spend your time together and separately, as well as how you resolve disagreements or challenges that you encounter just in normal life, financial things. All of that has to be compiled. And the social worker in your state who you hire to do your home study for you needs to ensure that you meet your state's minimum requirements to be approved for the child that you're hoping to adopt or the characteristics of the child or children you're hoping to adopt. So if you're wanting to adopt 3 or 4 children, they need to make sure your home can accommodate that. If you're wanting to adopt a newborn or versus a teenager, then they need to make sure that you meet those requirements and that you have the training, usually like infant CPR type of training for like a newborn or whatever it will be that could be involved in your adoption. They will provide those resources for you. So it is a process. Background checks, some things may come back right away and some may take weeks to come back
Mhm.
because it is a level 2 child abuse clearance, the background check and child abuse clearance. So it's like sex offender registry, everything, right?
Mhm.
And it can be multiple states. So you may be waiting for background checks to come back from a state that your husband lived in 4 or 5 or 7 years ago,
Right.
right? Or if you both lived in different states before you got married and then settled in one state, then both of those other states have to be part of it too. So 6 to 8 weeks to get all of that done, including home visits and interviews in person with the social worker, which are scheduled. It actually doesn't seem like 6 to 8 weeks is much time. You will complete a ton of steps in that time. It is a very
Mhm.
rigorous process, and the social worker will guide you through every step. So one thing is that you don't have to know everything she's going to need in advance. She will guide
Right.
you through that. They have their own way and process.
And they usually provide a checklist. They'll provide
Hmm.
you a lot of forms to complete. And, you know, Kim, I like the word you use, rigorous.
Hmm.
It's not that it's a lot of work. It's that there are a lot of different forms required. As Kim mentioned, you do have to go get background checks, and to be totally, transparent here, if there are things families do to speed them up and slow them down. In fact, I think a lot of the delays in home studies are often kind of self-inflicted. And what that means is, uh, you may take your time filling out the forms because some of the questions may feel invasive. Tell us about how your parents punished you when you were a child. How if you've been married before, tell us about the marriage and what led to divorce. Some of those might be a little hard to sit and write about, but, um, you know, really just getting through them to the end is what keeps things moving. Other um, pitfalls that can slow families down might be if you do need a current physical. And depending on, when your doctor can schedule that, that may slow down that 6 to 10 week timeline. Um, if there are documents that you don't have, requesting them, if you've been previously married, you will need some legal form showing your divorce decree. If you don't have that, you have to request it. Again, those things can kind of slow you down. Not responding quickly to social workers definitely can slow you down. If you have pets, they need current vaccinations. These are all opportunities to make the appointments and follow through or put them off and be slowed down. So it's just being aware. If If speed is something you're interested in, get on it. If you want to take your time and stretch that 6 to 10 week average to maybe 10 to 12 week, then you can go at a different pace. It's up to you. You're also going to have to accommodate, I guess is a good word, your social worker schedule. If your social worker schedules your appointment after she receives all the paperwork, which is typical, they will come for a home visit and interviews, but typically they won't do that until they have received all the documents. You get everything in, and they may say, my first opening is in 4 weeks. So just be aware. None of this is to scare you. It's really to educate and prepare you to what can affect the timeline for your home study.
And once she has done that home visit, she needs to have a week or two to compile everything into a report that she writes and edits.
Right.
So it's an entire narrative of all of the ingredients of
Mhm.
your home study. Another thing to remember is most states require background checks and physicals to be under a year old. There are things in your home study that are time sensitive that if those expire, and then you have an opportunity to adopt, you may miss that opportunity because you're actually not legally able to receive placement. So that is very important. And what we really encourage families to do is get ahead of it,
Mhm.
knowing it can take time to get on the calendar with your doctor, knowing it can take time for backgrounds to come back. Schedule those to get the ball rolling on those updates a month or two in advance so it does not
Definitely.
lapse.
You bet.
Yeah.
So again, I think Kim and I are also of the mindset that at the same time you're doing that, that's a great time to also be working on your adoption profile. Sometimes it's called a resume, your presentation materials, whether you're doing a book, a website, whatever you're doing, it's a great time to do that also because as you're filling out these biographical forms for the home study provider, you also can be thinking about, okay, what is it we want to show a potential birth mother about our life right now? So you can do those things at the same time. Most families do need to take photographs for that. And, this whole time is an active part of your adoption. This is not a time you're waiting. This is a time you are actively doing the things that will make you eligible and available to adopt. So it's just great to know that, especially like I mentioned, getting all the forms in and then waiting for the social worker's calendar. That's a great time. You've got all the forms in. Now let's pivot and work on the profile while we're waiting for that interview. So you really, once you have that momentum going, you are keeping it going with what is needed in this phase because it is highly encouraged to have your home study done and your profile done right around the same time because that's when you are now adoption ready and eligible to be chosen.
And profiles can take a couple of months to complete. A
Mhm.
really good, intentional, methodical process of creating a profile it's not just going to be a weekend job,
Right.
right? And hopefully you will have someone helping you with creating your profile and you won't just be on your own.
Definitely.
So you're not just like throwing spaghetti at a wall, right? You have experienced guidance in that, which is super valuable. I know most adoptive parents are hoping to get some guidance and feedback, and it's normal to have revisions. Just like in your home study, it's normal to
Mhm.
have more things that they need or that for your specific situation, you might have more steps to do. Like, sometimes a home study provider will ask a family to complete counseling about a certain
Right.
thing in their
Mhm.
history. So just keep
Mhm.
that in mind. That could be a longer time frame that's not in your control, but you can control how proactive you are being and just understand it's a process. Keep taking the steps, doing the
Right.
things you need to do. Every time you receive something, put the ball back in her do the step, put the ball back in the court of your adoption professional home study provider.
Right. So really once those two things are done or nearly done is generally when families are able to start being shown to women considering placing their children for adoption. Again, that is your home studies either approved or nearly approved and your profile or your presentation materials are complete because obviously nobody really can consider you unless they have something to consider. So, that's the point at which, whatever adoption professional you're working with, you are probably also now active with them and can begin to be being shown. Now, sometimes families think, well, there might be a gap between having my things done and being shown, but usually there isn't a gap. Depending again on the path you're pursuing, usually there's not like a stop start right in there. Usually it's something that it is rolling and continuing forward.
Right, because Heather said, as you're wrapping things up, maybe your agency is happy to start presenting you, or
Hmm.
maybe they are able to present you earlier. Maybe they have some tools and some features of their services that allow you to get shown earlier. And some states don't allow you to get shown until your home study is done. And some home study or some agencies may require that you complete certain steps in their program before you can get shown
Right.
certain education. And sometimes they may have a wait list to start getting shown. So we're kind of in the next segment here.
Yes.
When do we start getting shown to birth moms? It varies depending on your agency, right?
Hmm.
Some
Hmm.
agencies may say, well, there's a wait list. We have to wait until these certain families adopt, and then you can come in and start getting shown. And so you're just waiting for the call to start getting shown.
Hmm.
Some
Hmm.
agencies may have you on a rotating list
Hmm.
with other families so that you're the next to get shown, and then you go to the bottom of the list and you rotate back up. That is very normal.
Hmm.
And then some agencies may say, well, we're going to actively present you just based on your preferences. Even though you're brand new here or have been waiting a year, you're getting shown to all the birth moms that match preferences with you.
Hmm.
So timeline on getting shown to birth moms varies, and that is a great question that I love when adoptive families ask me, well, how soon are we going to get shown to birth moms? And so then
Hmm.
it kind of depends on the scenario, and we'll kind of customize the answer to them. But every agency has a different, you know, way of going about that.
Right. Right. And really, that's when you start the next phase, which is the waiting phase.
Hmm.
And it is when you are actively being shown and you are waiting. You're waiting for a expectant mom or a mom with a young child to choose you. And the time frame for that, it can be completely unpredictable. And that is because it is dependent on many things. You can be chosen in days, weeks, months, years. And it just depends really on two things. First is your preferences, which we'll talk a little about, and second is on a connection. You're waiting for someone to connect with you, look at you, and say, "That's who I want for my child."
Hmm. Well, and also, when it comes to different agencies, agencies will tell you, hey, we've only done 6 adoptions in the past year.
Hmm.
Right? So I think it's time for you to expand your search. So you may have chosen to start with a small local agency and maybe you get an adoption within 6 months or that first year.
Hmm.
And then if it doesn't happen and you're looking kind of at the numbers and it just realistically makes sense that you
Hmm.
probably need to switch gears, be a little more proactive,
Hmm.
right? But like Heather said, your preferences are going to play a big role in that. If your preferences are very narrow in certain areas, such as the race of the baby, or maybe there's a gender preference, or region of the country you're willing to travel to, or maybe not willing to travel outside of your state at all. Maybe you're limiting it to just adoptions where a car drive would be your transportation versus being willing to get on an airplane. These are all
Hmm.
things I've had families ask me over the years. Can we do this? Should we do this? Does it limit us if? And these are all factors to consider. If your preferences are very specific, not as many birth moms have that opportunity to choose you, or if your agency is presenting you with cases, regardless of your preferences, you're
Hmm.
not going to be as willing to move forward with as many of the cases that you're seeing. One way to become more aware of this, not necessarily avoid this, but is to really be clear on what you are planning to say yes to in your adoption. Be really clear on that. Not what you're hoping for or what you prefer necessarily, but what you would really say yes to, even if it might not be your ideal scenario, the picture perfect scenario. What could you see yourself saying yes to? Get very clear on that and be sure that before you start with an agency, you're really clear with them on that so that you can ask for their feedback. Do you see cases that I would be a yes to? Do you see them on a regular basis? Or ask for, clarity, like honesty. Is it going to take me longer because I have these certain preferences? Is this narrow? Um, is what I'm seeking the exception, the rare exception? Is it like the 5% of what you see versus the 95% of what you see?
Right.
For example, if an agency primarily sees like over 90% newborn adoptions, but you're only willing to adopt a child over 5 years old, well, now you are looking for
Probably not
something
a
that
good
is
fit.
the rare exception. Yes, you can come to your
Right.
conclusion, probably not a good fit, right? You'll probably be waiting like many, many, many years. And
Right.
yeah, so these things really control your opportunities, not necessarily your time frame per se, but you can get in front of more birth moms if you do have more open preferences and when you're with an agency that specializes and sees on a regular basis the type of adoption you're okay with, and then allow that birth mom to decide for herself if she feels that connection with you, which is the norm. In modern
Mm-hmm.
adoption, the birth mom chooses the family, and usually the family getting chosen is overjoyed to be chosen. One, they were very clear on what they're okay with, and they
Mm-hmm.
decided that before she ever came along. So now that she's chosen them, they're all in. And knowing this and having clarity on what you're okay with in your adoption really helps you prepare for that moment that you can be all in without hesitation when you're chosen by a birth mom. And so that she never has a doubt lingering in the back of her mind as she continues to take her steps forward, continually deciding, yes, 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 I'm continuing to take these next steps, that she's not lingering in her back of the mind, in the back of her mind, oh, but they were kind of like not that thrilled. They
Right.
had to go away and think about me, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And certainly we're not suggesting you don't think about it. But there are things that can lengthen the time it takes. Can I share something with you that's been really meaningful in my own walk alongside adoption? It's called the Adoption Prayer Bracelet, and it's become one of my favorite ways to stay connected with adoption through prayer. Whether you're in the middle of your own adoption journey, standing with someone who is, or you simply feel called to pray over adoption, this bracelet serves as a quiet reminder to pause and lift it all up to God. It's simple, beautiful, and full of purpose. You can check it out online at adoptionprayerbracelet.com. Like Kim mentioned, narrow preferences, wanting, not to travel, to stay local, that's one. Um, Slow responders. We
Mm,
need, I've had families, Kim, tell me, can you give us the weekend to think about it? No, sometimes I can't.
mm-mm.
Sometimes when I've been working on cases that are truly last minute from the hospital calls, it is, call a family. Here's everything we know. Here's all about the baby. Here's all about the mom. Can we have 2 hours? No, no. I mean, I realize this is a life situation, but let's talk now. What questions do you have that you need 2 hours to talk about? Because maybe it's talking to me and asking those things so that I know if this isn't a good fit. What are your concerns? What is going on? That really helps engage because I will tell you, it doesn't matter who you are or where you are when you get that call, it is a bit of a shock. It is a bit of a what? What are you calling about? Um, and it really um, first off takes a few minutes, I think, to sink in because
Mm-hmm.
it can be a very sudden shift in your life. I mean that's just what it is. But we also want, to be sure that that's why, Kim and I are big on talking about preferences, talking about what you'll say yes to, because it's a lot easier to recognize if you've already done the work in your brain to know this is what I'm waiting for, this is what it looks like, these are my preferences, and this is what I will say yes to. Because then when you get the call, you already have it defined in your mind what is a yes. And if there is something that's a hesitation, then that's the opportunity to talk to your agency about it. This all sounds good, but this is what I'm hesitant about. Having those open dialogues, because I think one of the hardest things for me, Kim, is when a family has opted to pass on an opportunity only to come back a few weeks later and say, you know what, I can't quit thinking about that. I should have said
Mm.
yes. That's tough. So, I think overall what we're trying to say is, while you may not be able to control everything in this waiting period, your preferences and your your readiness to say yes really can affect and influence how long you will be in that waiting phase.
And if you're new to the adoption process and just hearing all of this for the very first time, kudos to you. Brownie points for you for starting your research early and learning and taking the time and investing into listening to a podcast like this, Let's Talk
Hmm.
Adoption, because you're understanding the concept that Heather and I are sharing before you're in the thick of things. When we talk about setting preferences in advance, it gives you that chance to do the research, pray about it, talk about it, see how you feel, and decide. And I call that like deciding on dry land, right?
Hmm.
Before we're like in a boat somewhere in the middle of the ocean and the waves are going crazy. Like you already decided and you're solid and confident about your decisions. And it really
Right.
helps. Yeah.
It does. So another timeline question we often get asked is about that time when you match. How far along in pregnancy is the mom? Because, you know, that's actually often a question families don't ask until they're a little deeper into adoption. We know that a pregnancy is 9 months. And so there's this assumption that, well, I'll match and I'll have 9 months. That's not always the case, because babies can be born anytime. But
Hmm.
most matches in adoption happen in either the second or the third trimester. I know, Kim, for us, we're both big believers that, matches should not happen before at least 20 weeks in pregnancy, which is halfway through, which is when that mom has felt the baby move and it's real. It's not just a plus sign on a plastic stick. It is a real pregnancy, a baby. It's there. Um, and to be perfectly honest, I think that um, in adoption, an early match, I think really that's that falls under that, what makes an ethical agency. I think waiting until, I'm not going to say late in pregnancy, but later in pregnancy, not 6 or 8 weeks along, is really a hallmark of an agency or an adoption professional that's taking its time to ensure that that mom is at a place where she's ready. So that's really just good to know that most matches are second or third trimester. Certainly, especially if you have a mom who is very committed to a process or maybe a personal connection, those early matches can happen. You can also get, like I mentioned earlier, last minute calls from the hospital. Any of those things are normal, and all of those things are common.
Hmm. And, birth moms can start looking through families even before halfway as
You bet.
part of her education
Hmm.
and understanding of what adoption could really look like and be like. And so, of course, most adoption agencies share family profiles on their website.
Hmm.
So she can be looking at profiles at any point in her pregnancy, but to solidify a match, I like what Heather said about it being about halfway. There are many factors as to why that's beneficial for the birth mom as well as for you, right?
Right.
To reduce
Definitely.
the risk and emotional roller coaster if we can avoid it. I think it's a good
Right.
thing.
Definitely. So in newborn adoption, obviously there's a hospital involved in most cases,
Yes.
and In a lot of adoptions, the baby is discharged from the hospital to the adoptive parents, and that the attorney or agency in the state of the birth mom is going to be the one assisting with all of that. And I think one thing that sometimes families don't take into consideration is there may be a hospital stay that continues after they arrive. It's not that they get there, here's your baby, and off you go. There may continue to be a hospital stay. Normally, after a regular delivery, it's 24 to 48 hours. After a C-section, it's usually 2 to 5 days, depending. And then certainly depending on the baby, if baby's early, there's going to be a longer stay. If the baby has had any medical challenges, or even if mom has had certain challenges during delivery, that may, it's not uncommon to have a baby stay for a week to receive IV antibiotics if mom has, maybe not secured all of the prenatal care she needed. So typical stay is really going to be dependent on the situation. And then if mom has been using any type of narcotics or opioids, there may be some extra days also for monitoring or withdrawing. It just really depends on the exposure level and how the baby's doing.
hmm So that could mean, 2, 3 weeks on average if there
Hmm.
was drug exposure and the baby was born with drugs in his or her system and needs that extra care and monitoring. It doesn't mean the baby's not healthy. In fact,
Right.
Heather, we've spoken with many professionals who share with medical professionals, that is,
Hmm.
who share with us that, babies typically do pretty well once they've
Right.
gone through the withdrawal and have gotten,
Hmm.
the comforting and the bonding. And there are definitely some special techniques
Hmm.
that people can share with you when they specialize in this infant care.
Right.
So, but that can delay your time out of state too.
Hmm.
And we're going to get back to the interstate adoption process in a
Right.
minute, but here's something that families really want to know the timeline on. How long until we know the adoption will be irrevocable, or how long does she have until she can no longer change her mind about the adoption?
Right. And that's a it's kind of an emotional topic, kind of a big emotional
Mhm.
topic on all sides. Uh, I want to preface it by saying the birth mother state typically is what controls this. And usually she cannot sign her consents until 24 to 72 hours after delivery. Sometimes it's not till after discharge. It just really depends on the state law. And that's true also for how long she has to change her mind. Some states she signs and it's irrevocable. Some states she has a few days. Others, it's up to as many as 30 days. There's even a few states where a mom has to go to court. Those are very, very few states, but it it really it just depends. And when you are matched, that's part of what your agency or professional will uh, be sharing with you is how long she has. And because there's your state and there's her state, if you're in two different states. If you're in the same state, then there's just the state you're both in. Uh, Really, that's where we rely on experienced, qualified adoption attorneys to help define whose laws of which state are going to take precedence. And so, you know, I feel like I've said, in 10 different ways, it all depends. But really, what's good to know is that when you're matched, you will know. You will know those time frames. And while I know it's nerve-wracking and I know it feels like you're watching the clock, honestly, the best thing you can do if you have a birth mother that wants to build a relationship with you is build that relationship. Don't don't be in fear of if or when she changes her mind. Just know that she's doing her very best, and if she does change her mind, it's likely nothing you did or didn't do. It's because you both love this same child.
Hmm.
And so it's like I say, you'll know that time, and nothing Kim or I say will make it any less nerve-wracking, except like I say, just know it's part of adoption. And it is it's one of those things that while we may not be able to control the time frame, we can control our knowledge of it, and we also can control how we feel about it. And adoption is, it's a risk. It requires courage. It requires, um, you know, I think the best adoptions are the ones where the adoptive parent has taken the risk to bond with the birth parent, knowing that it's all for the love and best interest of the child.
And a couple more components to keep in mind specifically for families of faith, right?
Hmm.
We think about God's timing,
Hmm.
and we also think about in those moments where things are hard and out of our control, really being intentional to surrender the timing of your adoption to God's timing.
Hmm.
And I think as a family of faith, preparing for that spiritually is a wise thing to do at all stages of your adoption.
Hmm. Absolutely. So the other thing that's going on concurrently to the birth mother time frame is what you've heard us mention, ICPC, the Interstate Compact um, timing. And what that means is if you live in one state, baby's born in another state, two state laws, ICPC is the framework by which the two state laws interact. It's just part of adoptions that take place in two different states. You must stay um, in the state of the child's birth until you get approval from that state, and you cannot enter your home state until you have approval from that state. So often, um, that sounds like a lot. That sounds like, well, when can we move here or there? We're going to simplify it for you. The attorneys handle the ICPC process. Um, it usually doesn't require you to do much of anything at all. The timeline, so you're waiting for that approval. The timeline for approval is probably averages 7 to 10 days. 10 days is, yeah, I mean, right now I've heard it can be 2 to 3 days. It just is really going to depend on the state you're in, on how long the process takes there, on if they're processing a lot or very few. It also depends on what are the holidays. If your baby is born, let's say on December 22nd, you're probably not going to get home until after New Year's, simply
Yeah.
because there's a lot of holidays in there.
Hmm.
You know, by the same token, if your baby's born on a Thursday and the attorney you're working with will work over the weekend, get everything ready to submit it on Monday morning, you might be home by Thursday. It just really depends on a lot of things. We usually advise families to plan on staying out of state about 2 weeks. And, it might be less, it might be more. But again, this is one of those processes that is often, most of it is outside of your control, except there is one part that is in your control, and that is ensuring you've hired and paid the attorney. Um, and that sounds, I know we laugh at that, but the that is one thing that I have seen hold up cases. The other has been engaging an attorney who is not experienced in the ICPC process. Well, he said he did adoptions. He was a family law attorney. A family law attorney who doesn't specialize in adoption probably has never done an adoption requiring the ICPC process. And so we always recommend, hiring a specialized adoption attorney for this very reason, to keep that time frame short.
Something to think about because when I talk with families who are just learning about these timeframes for the first
Uh-huh.
time, they're like, out of state for 2 weeks. I can't do that. I have to be at work. Well, keep in mind, you're going to be saving up your PTO. And most employers with a decent benefits package, your paternity maternity leave is also applicable for adoption. So
Right.
look into that in advance so that you know what to expect. But it's usually for most people, their situation is not going to be 2 weeks out of state with a zero paycheck. It's either going to be their PTO they've saved up, or maybe they've added some savings to pay for that if they are self-employed. There can be things that you can do, but usually there is adoption leave or bonding leave that starts during this time frame. And it's really the clearance is for the child. The child to be able to travel across state lines is what is needed. Either of you can come and go, but hear me when I say the priority is focusing on this baby. So make every effort possible for you both spouses to
Hmm.
be there with the baby as soon as possible for as long as possible, not just because you need a bond with your baby, but also in the eyes of the birth mom. What's she observing? What's
Hmm.
she observing as you prioritize or maybe are lacking focus on this child? And as Heather said, this is concurrent with her time frame in many states that she still has the clock ticking on choosing whether or not she goes through with this adoption or chooses to parent or goes with a different family even, right? So you want to really stay the course and don't cause any speed bumps for no good reason.
Right.
Now, if you're a military family, let your command know in advance that you have an adoption going on. Be very clear on communication, timely with your communication. I know that is like the number one thing a chain of command appreciates is excellent communication and timeliness. So they will not be shocked when you say, oh, we got a call that we're adopting a baby and I need to leave now. They will most likely be very supportive of that because you have been vulnerable with them and shared what's going on in your life, and you've prepared them that you do have an adoption that could take place at any moment. But in the event that, let's say, one spouse is deployed, then you can do a power of attorney, and there are things you can do. Your
Right.
adoption professional will guide you through this, but just know all the what ifs, there is provision. Okay.
And I think during that time too, it's good to remember that you can get together with the birth mother. You're still in her state. And many times they appreciate that. They appreciate the
Mm.
opportunity to spend a little more time with you and spend a little more time with their baby before you travel back home. So once you get the go ahead that it's time to go back home, your baby has the clearance. You you travel back home and really are starting a little different phase. Your home study provider will contact you and begin to schedule what are called post-placement visits. And these are much easier than the visits to your home she made before you adopted. She will just come by. Um, Usually social workers love this part of the adoption process because
Mhm.
they see you as a family. They will ask about how the pediatrician appointments are going. They will ask about how you are doing. They will offer any resources you may need. And typically, there's at least probably one a month for maybe 3 months of post-placement visits that then are written up and prepared to submit to the court as part of the adoption finalization. So when the court receives the paperwork, that's part of what they're looking for are your post-placement visit reports as part of the whole packet.
And really, this is for most families a formality, right?
Yes,
You schedule these visits, these appointments with your home study social worker, complete the steps, and then you move on to finalization,
right.
the last step.
And I just want to say real quick, Kim, the post-placement visits, usually they last no more than 20 to 30 minutes.
I like
Um,
that.
they're
Hmm.
usually more of a social visit than anything
Yeah.
else. And anything that she needs usually can just be emailed to her as far as the documentation. But
Hmm.
yes, once that's done, we move to finalization, and that is when your whole adoption packet goes to the court um, so that the adoption can be declared permanent and irreversible. Often there is a court hearing that you can attend. Sometimes that you don't need to. Your attorney will let you know what your options are. Some courts they do adoption finalizations like every Thursday afternoon once a month, and they have stuffed animals and cake and different things for all the families coming to finalize. Others don't. Others may just do them all by Zoom. Again, your attorney will let you know what options you have, including if the decision has been made to finalize your adoption in the birth mother state, the state your baby was born in, then probably showing up for court isn't an option, but you might be able to show up by Zoom. So it's really going to depend. And that process of finalization, that is then after that when you will, um, well, at that point, that's when your child's last name will be officially your last name or any other name changes you've made.
Mhm. Which then, now that you've gotten all these official documents saying that your adoption is finalized, now you can apply for that birth certificate with your names as mom and dad and the name that you've given your child. So that way, let's say you're registering them for activities as they grow up
Hmm.
or school, and a birth certificate is always needed, then you're showing up as mom and dad on the form and your child name on the form, not some other last name with another birth mom who will never be picking the child up from swim practice,
Right.
type of thing. So that's when you can request your birth certificate. So in adoption, there's an original birth certificate, and then there's the birth certificate that you have as the parents once you finalize your adoption. It usually arrives within 4 to 6 weeks. And then also from there, you can request the social security number.
Right. And typically that will come again with your child's new name on it, and they will
Hmm.
usually reissue a totally new social security number in most cases, or at least last I knew. So,
Hmm.
and
So,
go ahead.
so this was a lot. This was a
This
lot
was
of
a lot.
steps, right? It's good to just get the lay of the land. Certainly, we do not expect every family to remember every aspect of what's coming your way and to know this by heart like the back of your hand. If you have a quality adoption professional, they're going to be guiding you through each and every one of these steps. You're going to have maybe a team of adoption professionals, your agency, your home study provider, your attorney, and they each have their role as you flow through the complete adoption process. So just rest assured you will be just following one step at a time with the guidance of trusted and experienced adoption professionals that you've chosen to partner with in your adoption. So don't be overwhelmed. Thousands and thousands of families all across the country for decades on decades have completed these steps, and you can too. But it's important to just stay the course. Don't cause unnecessary delays in your timing. Put that ball back into the court of the professional and make sure that you are staying in good communication so that you can cross that finish line to this completed successful adoption.
You bet. And I want to share that, when you're in the process, um, these timelines may feel long or seem long because you are in them and you are waiting. If I can give families any single tip, it is, like Kim said, stay the course and do the thing, but don't just wait. Be sure you're
Mm,
still living your life. You're taking the trips. You're, doing the things. You're learning, you're growing. Continue to live life. Don't just wait. Because if there's one thing that's going to make any timeline in adoption feel longer, it is just sitting and waiting. Our bodies aren't made to sit in that tight anticipation for long periods of time, and it can be exhausting.
mhm.
Do the work in front of you, but keep living your life. And one day you'll look back and realize that, you know, this was a period in time where you had to do these things to build the family that you were hoping for. And it will seem honestly, it'll seem kind of easy in retrospect, but it's something that, you know, you're building. Your family is the most important thing you will ever build. And so, staying proactive, making progress every single day, but also, like I say, not getting mired in the wait. That's one of the best things you can do.
I love that you brought that up, Heather, and reminded us of that. And for some families, that might be a new concept to keep in
Hmm.
mind. How you wait, it will start to impact you over a period of time. And even just while talking about this, I'm not even in an adoption process, but I found myself holding my breath a little bit sometimes,
Hmm.
right? Just
Hmm.
imagining and talking about it. So just breathe physically.
Hmm.
Remember to breathe and figuratively as well. Give your life some breath while you're waiting. Yeah.
Definitely.
So thank you for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk Adoption. As always, we welcome your feedback, comments, questions, show ideas, and suggestions for guests that you think would be a good fit for us to interview here on the podcast. And be sure to subscribe and feel free to share these episodes, whether on your social media or with anyone that you think it could be helpful for. And don't miss out on our past episodes either, because we've had some really good ones. And I think we're doing a great job, Heather, of covering a lot of the different topics.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like creating this puzzle where like each episode is a piece of the puzzle. So I
Mhm.
think as you go back and even listen to some of the past episodes, it will be helpful. And we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us on Let's Talk Adoption. If you'd like to learn more about today's episode, please visit letstalkadoption.com. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a conversation. Until next time, take care and God bless.